Hello, hello, hello. More family to our third day of 7 days of resurrection praise. I don't know about you, but I've been having a really good time, and we have a special weekend edition. And since it's the weekend, guys, I guess I must have not told my clothing and styling and makeup staff to stay on because I'm having to go a little sans everything. I tried to powder my nose at least and put some lip gloss on, but it's fine because one thing about our special guest today, she shows me so much how beauty on the inside and the outside is best seen uncovered and transparent. And she's going to be transparent today. So I know I have some loyal Hope More family that although this recording is happening like 2 hours before I said, or 3.5 hours before, it's going to be done as a watch party because of our guest having a lot of things that she has to get done this weekend. I thank you for coming on. So if you're on now, great. If you're on at the watch party, great, because all of this is about really talking and empowering each other that no matter how dead and dying things look in your life, or how dead or dying things may look in the people's lives that you love, there's always the power of resurrection. And in this resurrection weekend, where as Christians, if you're a Christian, we believe that Jesus Christ, this was his like last full day in the earth, or doing whatever he was doing with hell, death, and the grave, before he bust open and changed the whole game when it came to our ability to have a direct access to God, and it's known as resurrection. So in honor of that, I was too thrilled when I got the idea of what are everyday, but not common necessarily, but just struggles that at times leave people left feeling like they're dead or dying, and what people would be willing to come on and share their resurrection story. Because today we're going to probably deal with like life as it manifested, and then a moment of betrayal as Jesus was betrayed, death, and not just death, literally like crucifixion, which is more than just passing away, and then resurrection. And sometimes the resurrection part is even though it's the most glorious part, it's usually the quickest because these people are already years often away from the craziest of times when they felt they were dead or dying. So we can see by their glory that they're walking in resurrection power. But I'm not going to keep my guests waiting much longer. But listen, hey, you need to share this. I think there's no person in the United States, particularly in this time, who doesn't have or have themselves known someone who's dealt with substance abuse. That uncle who drinks too much, but no one says he's an alcoholic, but everyone knows. Or that person who likes to do Molly on the weekends and they seem to now do it on Monday and Tuesday. Or that person who may like, oh, I only do prescription drugs, and they take their Oxycontin a little bit more than they need to. We need to understand that addiction itself is an aspect of death and dying, and Jesus Christ can bring resurrection even by using things that you never would think would help bring you to your senses. So I need you to click on and share only at 5:30. Click on and share at 5:30. Share it with your groups. And if you are on now, please save it and bring it back at 5:30. Okay, join us at the watch party. As well as if you are on the Hope More YouTube channel, please click the bell so you get notifications of lives. Okay, so I understand that you follow on Facebook, so follow the Hope More page, and you subscribe on YouTube. I'm getting used to that language. So I'm hearing and feeling the love in this place, and actually, this is a very different type of setup for both Brandi Turner, our special guest, and myself. So we appreciate the love. For those who are watching now, feel free to join in with your comments and thoughts either now or at the watch party, because we need to know that you are not just listening, but you think highly, as well as the encouragement that the information that you're hearing really either will serve as an inspiration to you or someone you know. So without further ado, I'm going to bring my guest on. Yes, the lovely Brandi Turner. Hi, sweetheart.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, good. We already got someone. Chandrika, you are like, girl, you're golden. Happy Saturday. She gives so much love. I love it. So as I said, although this is a pre-recording, it is no different. It's actually probably going to be a little bit more transparent because we're not worried about what's said exponential. Oh Lord, what am I trying to say? Extemporaneously, right? Because I can always go back and edit. And this particular subject matter that we're going to talk about can get very, very triggering for the people listening and the people sharing. So I've already told Brandi, like, you guys don't think it's side eye. If there's something I ask, because I most of the time do not pre-interview my guests, so that you can hear it as I hear it, and the conversation could be more genuine. But if there's something that I ask that either, is not necessary for the story or triggering or just like it'll take us down another vein because I realize we're attached to people, things, and places as well as jobs. Just feel free to say like, hey, long story or next question. I'm only sharing that on screen so my listeners will not think that there's any like trying to hide. But one thing I definitely appreciate, Brandi, as a professional in this community that we both live in and where we both work, that you have a wonderful reputation of empowering other people. So I don't want in any way that any of your participation would ever dare touch that. Okay. So,
Right.
but before we get to all that, Brandi, although you've been a guest as well as one of my favorite top fans, could you tell my Hope More family just a little bit about yourself?
Yes, my name is Brandi Turner, as mentioned. I work for the Refuge House as a sexual assault victim advocate. I've done that now for about 10 years. Before that, I was in the medical field some. Um, I've I've raised one child. He's 21 years old now, so he's grown and gone and on his own. And I still
To
live
your
with my
dismay,
mom.
to your dismay, super
Yep.
mom that you are. Yeah, well, for those of you who may remember last year when we had a rash of homicide or domestic violence related homicides, I had Brandi come on and we talked about a lot of things that we hoped helped victims of violence. And she is, when I tell you, a mighty advocate. And as a person that works in restraining orders and injunctive work in assisting victims, we work together under the mighty umbrella. Now I can say, last year wasn't the case, Refuge House. That we're both employed there. And it's just an honor because you shared with me almost as if we were asking about coffee. That, like,
Right.
well, I understand that experience because I dealt with addiction. And no, actually, no, it was more so when we talked about partying. And then
Right.
little by little, you're like, well, yeah, I dealt with addiction. I was like, 6 years.
Yeah.
Because you don't look like what you've been through. And
Thank you.
Brandi and I had the pleasure of being in high school together. I'm older than she, I think, by a year.
Yeah.
So I have my own thoughts of like your growing up because I always saw this gorgeous head of hair curls and this sweet demeanor, and you and your best friend were like stuck like glue,
Yeah.
and you just had rosy cheeks and just a sweetheart. So you and I both grew up in this almost picturesque small town, Perry, Florida, and we're both preachers' kids.
Yep.
So I know without telling me about prom dates and your fifth birthday party, coming into adulthood, graduating high school, what kind of person were you presenting yourself to the world to be?
What kind of person did I present myself to the world? Is
Oh,
that what you
how were
said?
you? Yeah, I said present because however that was, then I was going to ask about potentially, was that either coming from a true place or as you got older, what may have changed? So, yeah,
Right.
present yourself because we all
Yeah,
have
absolutely.
representatives.
So, so as a child, my childhood was really I had rose-colored glasses. I had cousins all around. We had a 1 mile road and 26 first cousins. So I was always home. I was always safe. I had my grandpa actually founded a church, and then my dad became a preacher later on. And so I really had a great, excellent childhood. And then on the other side of that is I've always had a wild hair as well. And
Just a
so
little one.
yeah, just just a little bit. And I still enjoy going out and doing things, and but as a young adult, I did start dabbling in drugs and hanging out with friends and smoking cigarettes and doing things that I knew was not supposed to be done, that I knew my parents would not be proud of. But that is not who I presented myself to be. That was a secret part of myself. That was the people that I was with, they knew what I was doing. But as far as to my family and to my church family and just really anybody else, I was still who I really am, and I
Which
hid
is
that,
who?
which is sweet and caring and compassionate and enjoy the simple life. That's who I am. I am, as you know, I'm an outside person. I love to garden. I love my cows. I love, I love the life that I had as a child. But as a young teenager, I felt like I needed to separate from that. I felt like it was oppressive, really. Which looking back now, I realize it was just safety is all it was. It was a good family with a lot of support. But at the time, it felt like it was oppressive. It felt like I was trapped and I couldn't be who I wanted to be, which was that wild hair talking, and so yeah, I hid that away. So the way I presented myself to the world was who I thought they wanted me to be. And really now that I'm on the other side of addiction, it's who I really am. But at the time I felt like it was who everybody else wanted me to be, if
You
that
know,
makes sense.
it does make sense, especially having a very close family. When you
Mm-hmm.
have and grow up around your first cousins, as many as you did
Right.
around. I had about that many, but not all around me. But I had enough that I knew that people knew who we were, and we
Right.
sort of had and we still do. And it's great when you have a great family name.
Right.
But we sort of had, back then we didn't use words like brand, but we had a reputation.
Right.
And although everybody's parents did things different, but one thing you knew about, say, the Demps family, a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
women are teachers.
Right.
Okay, even if a lot of them weren't necessarily preachers, but they were religious, they were deacons. I was a
Right.
preacher's kid, so you knew you were not just representing whatever you were up to doing that day as a teenager. You would sort of know, like, if I get in trouble, it's not going to just be with me or Chester and Carolyn Dents. It's
Right.
going to be the relative who's a councilman and, the person who's a deacon. And in that way, it does keep you accountable, but it can make you feel like, is this really the life I want? I don't even get to choose
Right.
it. I'm being told pretty
Right.
much by example how I'm
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be.
Right. Yeah, and the thing is you do hold on to that as well. You when you're out in the world and you're doing your own thing, you almost feel like you're in a bubble and nobody can really see you. But the truth
Mhm.
of that is the opposite. The truth is people they do see. They may not believe what they're seeing, or they may not want to accept it because that's not the image they have of you. But you do feel required to hold an image that feels fake sometimes. Because you said something earlier, Hope, where we feel like people need us as preachers' kids to be perfect, and we're human, so we're not going to be perfect, right? Um, and so the image, and I say this a lot of times, I learned at that time in my life to really have two lives. I have a secret life and I have a public life, right? Because I needed my public life to represent my family, to represent my religion, to represent what everybody wanted to see. And kind of nervous to even talk about this today because there's still so many people that don't realize I went through addiction. But it is part of my story, and I don't regret it because I learned so much about myself and so much about um, why it's important to protect your reputation and why it's important to have a support system within your family. And I'm able to use that a lot today in the work that I do as well.
Yes, I made mention. Not only have you worked in advocacy and in medical fields, you have some other opportunities coming, but I won't announce that. But you are very much trusted. And when I say you don't look like what you've been through, it's not just
Thank you.
about physical image. You have
Right.
a light inside of you that
Hmm.
shines that's why for the first time in my life, I'm interested in gardening, because I'm like, if gardening makes you happy, like this one, and I really, she doesn't garden. She's running a farm, guys. You know, but
Not really.
I put the picture of you with the big old head of, was it cabbage
Yep.
or lettuce or cabbage?
Yep.
Because you don't seem as happy as anywhere else, but maybe the beach.
Yeah.
Except when you have your, like, you're talking about your herbs you cooked and you're gonna do this and all this kind of stuff, and Dandy Day,
Dandy Day Farms.
Dandy Day Farms, and I'm telling her she needs to go ahead, and she does more do things to represent, you know, that future conglomeration. I really believe it will be, and the pepper jellies and stuff that I would normally just be like, what? You have such a brightness. And I do know people
Thank
who
you.
used to be addicted or had
Yeah.
substance abuse issues, and they are wonderful people. But a lot of
Hmm.
times there's like this little darkness that comes up, and you're like, what's that about? And it goes
Hmm.
back. And
Yeah.
later I'll find out, like, oh, they had like a strong addiction, or
Right.
they were, or the drugs that they used was like nerve altering potential drugs.
Hmm.
And so when you said that, I almost thought, especially since you didn't say it right out, what the
Right.
way it came out, I'm like, oh, she's telling the truth. You
Yeah.
didn't embellish. You just like, oh, I can recognize, I empathize. I
Right.
wanted, being that we don't have a lot of time, and
Hmm.
I know, and I appreciate that you trust me with this conversation,
Hmm.
because this is the first time you talked about it publicly. You've talked to people
Absolutely.
individually, but what goes on the internet stays forever. So I'm
Right.
very aware and very protective of that. Um, so when you started having this secret life of, you know, just having fun, a lot of
Right.
which I'm sure started off as just good old American teenage rebellion, right?
Absolutely.
Um, you were
Absolutely.
not necessarily being abused at home and, you know, depressed. You're like, I just
Right.
wanted to be something other than a PK, a good girl,
Right.
um, you know, farm girl, cousins galore. I want to like express and try to figure out this other side. When,
Right.
for you, and you don't have
Hmm.
to give dates and times, but
Hmm.
what was there anything going on in your life when you felt like it went a little, it started going over? You know, it's not like, oh, I just got drunk this one time because
Hmm.
it was someone's wedding, but now I feel like, eh. Do you recognize when that was, even if it's hindsight?
I don't. I'll be honest with you. Like you
Wow.
said, I wasn't abused. I didn't have any kind of abuse in my childhood. I had a very supportive family, not just my immediate family, but my entire family to this day, very supportive. Um, very religious, very much so religious, my entire family. I think honestly, my wild hair, my moment was trying to figure out how to separate from that, right? Like when you're 17, 18 years old, you're already in a mode of trying to separate from your parents because you feel grown and you feel like you know everything, and or I did, and I wanted to have something that was just mine.
Wow.
And it was just fun at first, right? Like it was just to have some fun that I could keep a secret from my parents. And I know that sounds horrible, but I was 17, 18, I was
And
18
no,
years old. And so it was one of those times where I just felt like I was trying to find my independence and I didn't really know how to do that. And also influence as well, peer pressure, and just watching other people have what I thought was the best time of their lives and following suit. I guess I was more of a follower. Maybe that's where the insight is more. I was more of a follower at that time, but I was just trying to find my own way that was mine and not my mom and dad's, right? Like I think that's a typical teenage thing. Um, my way just happened to be with very addictive substances that took me down a pretty dark path. Eventually, at first it was loads of fun. I mean, I thought, and
it
until I
always
realized,
is.
yeah, until I realized it was, it was pretty dark. It was a dark time in my life for sure.
And I don't know if you remember Perry's Pride. Were you ever part of that group?
Yes, I was. I
Um,
was. I actually started performing live um, in that group. My first performance was with Pride. Yeah,
wow. So you
yeah.
must have been probably coming in when I was leaving out, or maybe we crossed each other. But
We probably crossed.
for those who don't know, especially big in the late 80s, early 90s, was to just
Hmm.
say no to drugs culture. And there were
Hmm.
all these grant funded and nonprofits that were focusing on basically helping children and teenagers and young people to say no. It's like you avoid addiction by never starting. Like
Right,
never starting. And you
right,
learn that you drink that people who consume a lot of alcohol, it's very easy then to try marijuana. And they're
right.
called gateway drugs. And
Mhm.
Pride, I forgot, Parents Resource and Drug Education, I think was called,
Right, yeah,
was
yeah, I
like
think so.
this fun organization that had a lot of education, but you performed and you sang, and we had our original songs and music and shirts and would travel. It's sort of like they get your mind off of drugs by trying to make you think you're a rock star. That's my
Right,
ticket. And so Pride and Perry was really big. Like
it was.
I knew people who were like, because you have to make a commitment not to drink. Even the
Right,
adults who ran the program, most of them made a commitment to not consume alcohol just to be an example because
right,
we weren't against responsible alcohol consumption, but no
right.
one under 21 in this United States can do that responsibly because similar to sex under a certain age is all a
Hmm.
crime.
Right,
And so we learn in Pride, and you were in it, that although it doesn't happen for everyone, there's often gateway drugs, the benign ones. I think nowadays people probably think of Molly as a gateway. To me, that's hard drugs, but
right,
you
right.
drink a little bit, then maybe it's wine coolers, and then it's beer, and
Mhm.
then it's liquor, and then it's like pot, and then it's
Yeah.
like pills. God
Hmm.
forbid it gets to heroin, acid, but these each substance, whether prescription drugs or illegal
Hmm.
drugs, gets harder and harder for you to repeat and
Hmm.
get to that place that makes you feel good. And that's
Right.
how addiction starts happening. Usually, for you, as you were starting to party and it's like this is feeling good and you got your friends and y'all are going out,
Hmm.
um, could you share just an instant where, and it may not have been the first,
Hmm.
where you were like, oh, this is way too much? Did you have one of those, God, if you get me out of this, I promise you I'll never do it again, but it was probably like the fifth or hundredth time you would do it again?
Right. Um, wow. That's a deep question. Let me think about that for a second. Yeah, absolutely. So interestingly enough, I did start out drinking a little bit. Never really been a big drinker. Don't like the way it makes me feel. Smoking pot, obviously. And then I went to meth. Like I went from smoking pot and drinking a little bit to meth. Um, Meth was a really dark place. And I can remember one time going to buy some, and as I was leaving the home, I noticed in the trees there were people with guns pointed at me. Um, and of course, that scared me really bad. I mean, I was happy I had my drugs, but it made me stop and realize the world that I had subjected myself to, I had never known. Um, I'd never seen the world as an evil place. Like I never thought that anybody would do that, I guess. And because my world again had, I was raised, I had rose colored glasses on. The whole world was happy and peaceful and it didn't matter. But that opened my eyes at that moment. It did not stop me from doing drugs, but however, it did stop me from wanting to be the one to go get them because it did scare me.
You had to like strategize around it. No, but that makes sense.
Right, right. And so that's probably the first time that I remember um realizing that the place that I was at was different. The world was a lot different. And honestly, it also made me want to explore that world a little bit more, and I felt kind of resentful that that I didn't know that the world had evil in it at that point.
Wow.
Um, Now I look back and realize just how blessed I was to be 18 years old and not have a clue that the world had any evil in it. I mean, not everybody can say that, as we know. Um, but at the time, I was almost resentful of it. I was almost like, why don't I know this? Like, why am I not street smart, right? Why can't I protect myself? Why? Because I didn't realize it. That would answer that question probably as completely as possible. There's other times, of course, but that one was probably the biggest one for me.
Can I say this for all children of rural and small town areas that, especially now, could you imagine now compared to when
Hmm.
we were, we didn't have the internet,
Right.
until we were like in our 20s, that, just because you are not exposed to all this glamorized criminal element or
Hmm.
exciting danger, because we have our own danger, okay? Have you ever been bumped
Right.
off a horse? Stop thinking that you're missing out. Like, and
Right.
I know it's easier said than done. And if I have anyone here under 18 listening, you may be rolling your eyes, but it's a blessing. And even for you city dwellers in suburbia who have parents who are on your case and they want to know where you are, and you have a curfew, and you have other friends who are like, oh, my parents are out of town for the weekend. And, I have the key to the liquor cabinet. Like,
Hmm.
for those who are protected and you resent it, listen to stories like this. Learn by revelation and not tribulation that it is so a blessing to have
Hmm.
protection. But I definitely
Absolutely.
understand, particularly also being in a religious family, that
Hmm.
I understand that Eve Adamic sort of curiosity about evil. Like, remember in the Garden of Eden, not to preach, but how Satan came as a serpent was like, you won't die if you eat of this. You'll know things basically. And
Hmm.
sometimes that revealing knowledge, even if it's scary as heck, like people in trees with guns, it does sometimes create this sense of not fear to not explore, but almost like, it is my right. I need to figure this out. The world ain't Pollyanna, and why do I not know this? Because now I'm vulnerable, and I don't want to be vulnerable. So let me just, in the movie, go look for what that noise is, versus saying, nope, I'm
Right.
good. And so you explored actually that world more. And how
I
did that
did.
look for you? Were you like basically working like Monday through Friday, and then the weekends you were like turn up, or how was
Oh,
that living
absolutely.
your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it became a daily thing for a long time. I was in
Oh, really?
addiction. Yeah, I was in active addiction for about 6 years. Um, with a few backslides after I cleaned up. I did backslide a few times. But yeah, I was in active addiction for 6 years, and when it started out, like I say, it was more of a fun thing. And then it was, I will say this. When I say I was in active addiction, and I mean, I definitely was, but I never, like when I quit, I never went through withdrawals. I was able to quit automatically, no help, anything like that. And I will get to that in a minute, I know. Um, but within that addiction, you start out, weekends, maybe once a month, maybe a couple of times a month, you're going out and having a good time, and most of the time you're not, right? And then what happens eventually is it becomes a daily thing gradually, because then you're bored to death without it, right? Like you can't imagine life without drugs, without um meth or cocaine or whatever it is that you're choosing to do. I was blessed in the sense that I never got addicted to heroin, although I did try heroin one time. I knew that it was something that if I did it again, I would never come back. And so I was
Wow.
able to recognize that. And I to this day, I know that if I had ever done it one more time, that would have been it for me. Um,
Wow. And you say that,
mhm,
and we're not glorifying. And one thing we did
right,
learn in Pride, you don't sit
mhm,
there and glorify your intoxication, especially with young minds, because they're like, that don't sound too bad.
right.
Was it that the heroin high made you feel freer or something? Why did you know automatically, I can't mess with this. Because if you were doing meth, which I hear is very, as they use the word orgasmic or otherworldly, what was it
Hmm.
about the heroin high or experience that made you think this is too much from the
It
first time?
Well, I'll be honest with you. It was the euphoric feeling that you got from it. The euphoria was a controlling euphoria. So, I'm in this position in my life where I'm trying to separate from what I considered to be control at that point. Um, and when I tried that, I realized how much of a control over my life that could have. Because if you've ever heard the Pink Floyd song "Comfortably Numb," that is how I
Mhm.
would describe that moment. Was I was completely and utterly out of control. I had no control over the way I felt. I had no control over my actions, and I knew that if I continued down that path, it would completely control me. And of course, at that point, I was in denial that anything else was actually controlling me, that I was in control of it. But I knew that this was a different path, and I just felt it immediately. And again, I'm not glorifying it. It felt too good. It felt like if I did it one more time, I would never get away from it. So it actually felt like a trap, even though at the moment it was like, whoa, that feels too good. I don't want that. I can't have that. And I know that makes no sense, but if you've ever been there, you'll understand. Um,
Actually, I never having been there, it does
yeah.
make sense because
Hmm.
there are different levels of, at least I won't even use the word sobriety, but where
Hmm.
where you feel like, oh, I can still drive or I can still do this, and something
Right.
that feels so good that you can, you know, do anything. I can see
Hmm.
that being disconcerting. And here's the
Yeah.
truth, Brandi. Even if your parents and some of the people you most admire didn't know what was going on with you, they were
Hmm.
praying for you. And I tell people all the time,
Absolutely.
especially preachers' kids, yes,
Yep.
the devil targets us often because they're trying to get to our parents, but
Yep.
we are often protected because of our parents' prayers. We think that, oh, I knew it was too much. Oh, I didn't drive
And
that
thank
car.
God.
I was too high. No, that
Yeah.
was God
Yeah.
honoring his promises to your parents. Like, I got her. I know. She, I
100%.
got her.
Yeah. And he did. And I'll be honest with you, even with like prescription medications, they don't, that, of course, they're not heroin, but they can be pretty close depending on what they prescribe you. And so once I got past addiction and to the point I realized even with prescription medications, I was taking it too far. Um, I started telling my doctors to put on my medical charts that I'm allergic to opiates. And so even though
Oh, that's
sometimes I'll get
good.
like, toothache or something like, or tooth surgery or something, they will prescribe it to me. But I actually had a dentist tell me the last time I had a problem with my mouth not to do opiates. And he told me to take some, it's a combination of Tylenol and Motrin. And he said it actually kills the pain better and you don't have the addiction properties with it. So I'm having, even 22 years later, I have to be really honest with myself,
That's so
um,
good.
but also really honest with my doctors and say, no, I don't want hydrocodone. No, I don't need that strong of a medication for anything. And it's because I know myself well enough to know how easy it would be to slip right back into life of addiction, and I don't want to do that. So,
Honest with yourself. You are
yes,
honest with yourself. And I know that also comes through prayer, whether through you, your parents, and then
right,
even the work that you do in
yeah,
these last several decades,
yeah,
you see the damage. But before you got to that,
mm-hmm,
as I've been talking about resurrection, I believe in all of these resurrection stories, there's a moment of betrayal,
mm-hmm,
just like Jesus. Whether even there's a moment of betrayal before the death, or there's a moment of even warning, like before, or maybe not even before the death. While you're dying, there's a moment of get your hands out. And for you, you share with me a moment that you felt utterly disgusted with yourself because of who it involved. Could you just share, as much as you're comfortable, or as
yeah.
little as comfortable,
I'm trying to
what that
remember
moment
what
was?
was that at the end when I finally
No,
stopped? Okay.
No,
I'm
not
trying to
when you
remember.
stop, because God knows, right? When it comes
Right.
to a lot of times, he, it's awesome when it's the first time and you get it and you're like, yes, Lord.
Right. Hmm.
But many times it's like, come on, come on. And I'm
Right.
particular for the
Oh,
time. I'm particularly when your dad found
I
you.
I remember now. Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah. And so and this one's hard to talk about because I do still carry the guilt from that somewhat. My dad did get to see me change before he died, so I'm real thankful for that. But I had taken some acid one time, and we were out all night long, and I was at a friend's house, and um I was laying in the bed, but I was looking out of the window, and it was early in the morning. We'd been up all night. And my dad drives up, and my sister's there as well. She was actually naked, but she was washing clothes and she had a towel around her. So she opens the door for daddy. And then when he comes in, he was asking where I was at, but he could see me. And I was hiding behind a lace curtain. A lace curtain. So he could see me. And I never came out of that lace curtain while he was there because I thought I was hidden. And so he at that time was like, you need to come home. And I did not go home for, I think it was about 2 or 3 days. I can't remember exactly, but I can remember the devastation on his face. I could remember the devastation that I felt. I didn't want to face him again. Obviously that was a difficult thing to do. Of course I just numbed myself by doing more drugs until I did come home. um, but there was another time too where he just caught me smoking cigarettes and I felt as just as guilty. But my dad, my dad was one that I think he might have tried alcohol a couple times in his life, but that's about it. He was
Right.
pretty, he was pretty a pure person, the only way I know how to put it. And so I lived with the guilt of that. I lived with the guilt of knowing that when I come home, my mom and dad knew I was messed up on something. Um, and it was hard. That was when you get to the point where you're having a good time but you're carrying guilt on a regular basis. It's a hell on earth, and I don't know how else to put it. It is a death. You have completely died to who you were. You think, right? Like, you think you'll never get out of that, you'll never get back to the person that you truly are. Um, but I'm here to say you can, and
Yes.
it's worth it. And the fact that my dad was able to see me clean before he died helps. But I still carry that guilt. I carry that guilt with me all the time. Not all the time. I carry that guilt when I think about it. I really think about, oh, what it must have been like as a father to be looking at your daughter who thinks they're hidden and they're behind a lace curtain. It was awful, actually.
You know what? That could be a sermon, You think you're hidden
Absolutely.
behind the lace curtains. And I don't know what pain you experienced, but
Hmm.
particularly Preacher's Daughters,
Hmm.
um, and Daddy Girls, period, of all walks of life, there is something about your dad seeing you in a way that you just feel totally exposed to some of the most dreadful parts of you.
Right.
And I just say this to you as a ministry moment, and
Hmm.
we can move on. You are a wonderful parent to your son.
I agree.
Is there anything he could ever do that would make you not love him?
Absolutely not.
Even shameful things that would break your heart.
No.
Wouldn't you rather know so you can pray at the very least and
Yep.
find ways to combat, even if it's just saying, come home? Because your dad could have said, oh, you get your stuff.
Right.
Get your stuff, Brandi. Love you like
Yep.
a biscuit. But your father showed the heart of God. He's like,
Yep.
come closer. We want to
Yep.
see you come home every night. We
Oh,
don't
no.
like the way you're coming home, but we want to see because you're coming home. This is a safe place. And I say that not just for you, but for the people out there. And some people have been kicked out. And I'm not saying that was a wrong decision in that family or whatever, but there are situations, and I'll just say it. When
Hmm.
I was in a relationship close to 30, And
Mhm.
I lost my virginity to this person, and he started acting in ways of like stalking. And I was so afraid to tell anybody because I felt it would expose the fact that here I
Right.
am, this so-called virginal, used to do the purity class, ring, be like, I don't know what's wrong with people. They just need to keep themselves in marriage. That
Right.
wasn't as important to my dad as I want you to be safe. Now,
Right.
it took me actually probably moving here to no longer think of those moments. Or sometimes
Mhm.
if he's disappointed, I'm thinking, is he thinking, you know what, if she would have stayed a virgin, she wouldn't have had this issue. And it could be something that has nothing to do with sex. And I'm
Right.
not equating that pain to
Mhm.
addiction and being caught, but I do have some sense of where I felt shame.
Mhm.
My father felt relief to know, at least, even if it
Yeah.
broke his heart. Because
Right.
I think it's very powerful that your preacher daddy, his response was, come home. You
Yeah.
need to come home.
Yeah.
Not, and I'm sure also there's parts of that like get it together, but to
Right.
come home, at least he knew you were home. That would have broken
Right.
his heart if you would have stayed away.
Right.
So I pray that encourages you. And I'm not just blowing smoke up your
Right.
butt, but I know how much you love your son. And we're going to talk
Mhm.
about how much the love came even before you met him, how
Right.
much you love your son. And I just couldn't imagine that there would be anything
No.
shameful, and you've walked through some things, that he could ever tell you that would
Right.
erase how much joy seeing his little tall chubby face come through those doors. That's
Right.
your baby.
That's
You,
right.
you
It
didn't
always
get
will be.
that out of the air. You experienced it, and you were blessed to experience it both
Yeah.
from your natural father and your heavenly father. So
Absolutely.
let's talk about, we've already talked about one man in your life that
Mhm.
sort of brought a whoa, now daddy knows.
Right.
What brought you, well, I guess that's your moment of betrayal.
Mhm.
What, and you've already described that death in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
because now the very thing you reached out to sort of have a new life and new identity, you're like,
Right.
I want my old identity back. And
Right.
I guess this coup de grace with my dad seeing it, can I even get back there?
Right.
What caused you to change? Or what was a moment that caused you to pause enough to make a decision that this is not the life you're going to live anymore?
Well, interestingly enough, and I call him my miracle child anyway, I got pregnant. And that's the one thing in my entire life that I always wanted was a child. I always wanted a lot of children. God gave me one. I was actually pregnant with twins, and I lost the twin in the first trimester. And I truly believe that has something to do with my drug use, because I was doing drugs for a month and a half before I realized I was pregnant. Heavy, heavy drugs. Um, until I did some drugs, and I can't remember exactly what it was that night. And I could not, like, every time I moved, it would make me throw up and it would make me throw up. And I kept thinking, what's going on? And I realized something was different. And so I went and had a pregnancy test, and I was about a month and a half pregnant, with twins. And I didn't know that it was twins until 4 days after my son was born, because I had a really healthy pregnancy. I was able to just completely, the moment I found out, I stopped everything. Um, I was
Why?
able to, because I wanted that child more than I wanted the drugs. I wanted to be a mother. I wanted to, it just really it was like the moment that brought the entire thing into focus for me. I realized that I was in a dead end. I realized there was nothing I could do. I was in a situation where I had to now think about this child before I thought about my wants. And I'll be honest with you, I did go through some withdrawals, but it was more withdrawals of that independence, because I did move back home. I came back home. I stayed here while I was, the first part of my pregnancy. Um, and I just realized it made me stop and think, wow, what you're doing to your life, if you continue this, your child is going to suffer forever. He's going to see it. He's going to be affected by it. Um, And interestingly enough, I never even told him about my drug use until he was around 13. And it came up in a situation in court, that I had to testify unknowingly in a situation. And they were asking me about my drug use, and my son was there. And so at 13, he had to hear that his mom was an addict. And so that was tough. But going back to the moment I found out I was pregnant, that was the end of active everyday addiction. I did have moments that I fell backwards a little bit. Lots of moments actually for a while. And then what stopped me then was, there was one time I'd been out all night long, and my son had might have been his first Cub Scout meeting the next morning. And I had to go to that Cub Scout meeting and be there and be present. And I couldn't. I mean, I was there and I did it. But it was like, over here, I was one person, and over here, I was another. And it really just brought me back to that same moment that, he's going to be affected by this. There's no way around it. When you have children, they are affected by your actions. And I wanted to be that safe space and that support system for him, like my parents had been for me. And I knew if I continued, I would not be. So that's what changed my life. God did. He gave me a child. And
And
then,
what
of
I
course,
love,
I have the guilt of the loss of the twin. I really blame that on the drugs. The doctors say that that's not normal. That's typically not how it happens. That if there's a twin, a lot of times you can lose a twin. But even the doctor now, when he held my son, he said, after we found out I had miscarried the twin, he was like, this child is just your miracle child, because there should have been no way that I carried that child for 9 months and that I had a healthy pregnancy for 9 months, because I had a dead fetus inside of me that they never saw. And so 4 days later, I ended up having to go in and get a DNC. 4 days after I had Brandon, I had to go in and get a DNC done, and they did test it, and it was a fetus. And so they said there was a miscarriage in the very first month and a half, and it just went right along with the drug use. And so I carry that guilt, which keeps me in check. And I know
well,
that sounds like I didn't know I had
it's
that
not
child.
even, if
I'm
I
sorry, go ahead.
may, it's not even that it's wrong for you to
Hmm.
have any reflection and regret.
Right.
When I hear carry the guilt, what I love is
Hmm.
that you're just so honest.
Hmm.
There is so much in what you just said in the natural that is so spiritual. And I
Yeah.
don't even, if I could, and I almost feel
Hmm.
like I'm having a ministry moment in front of people, but I really, not just for you, but people who listen. The
Hmm.
doctor said this was a miracle baby because
Hmm.
if, because you really don't know. There are plenty of people, and I understand women that miscarry and have children who don't make it. They blame themselves, and they are the most healthy. I
Right.
realize, even though I've never experienced that,
Right.
that's a common thought. But
Hmm.
the doctor said that if that was potentially the reason, it should have
Hmm.
happened to both babies. You should
Right.
not have had Brandon. So that
Right.
also leads me to believe that it wasn't the drugs,
Yeah.
or that in life, God could give us seeds. And I called your 6-year addiction state changed by a seed. At first it
Yeah.
says seed of joy, but a
Yeah.
seed.
Hmm.
But God will give us seeds, and there will be some that perish and not fully develop.
Right.
Have to be pulled from us in
Hmm.
sadness and even sometimes shame. But
Right.
then there's these miraculous seeds that pretty much were planted before you were even born, whether
Yeah.
through the righteousness of your grandmother, somebody. That's why I
Hmm.
always say somebody was praying
Yeah.
that brought and
I had a lot
preserved.
of people praying. A lot of people still pray. I mean, it's
Still,
a wonderful
that
thing.
brought and preserved that
Hmm.
son. And I think
Yeah.
all of us in the spirit have at times been pregnant with something that dies, something that not just
Right.
lives but thrives.
Yeah.
And it's a wasteless, it's not that it's not justified, but it is
Right.
absolute wasteless emotion for
Yeah.
you to carry guilt.
Well, and I want to
But
say,
I'm not asking for an explanation, and it's not really for you.
right, right.
I'm
Well,
talking to
and
the people out
I'd
there.
rather use the word conviction instead of guilt, because I really don't carry, I don't feel bad about my choices. It has molded me. It has given me that street smarts. It's allowed me to connect with people that would have never connected with me. So I want to change that word from guilt to
Yes,
conviction, because it
let's change
really is
that
a
word.
conviction. Yeah.
And
And because it really is a conviction.
and
Have you?
truthfully, please don't get me wrong. I know you know my heart, but anybody
Right.
who's watching, because one of the things that I do think, even as a minister now, that ministers in a Joel Osteen-esque way could sometimes oversimplify the idea. And I love Joel Osteen. And if you follow him beyond his Sunday message, he does
Oh
have a
yeah.
lot of depth to what he's saying. But I'm not trying to window wash away the idea that you would have guilt or that you deal with sometimes feeling guilty, and that
Right.
you also in your mind, well, you know what, I'm convicted, I'm not going to carry this, even if I just picked it up today,
Right.
I'm going to put it
Right.
down as a Christian. But I almost speak so strongly to that, not just to you but to the people who
Hmm.
are watching, almost like how you really blessed me when I interviewed you and I was using language regarding what could a victim do better, or I don't
Right.
know how I phrased it, but with, and it wasn't chastisement, I hope you don't feel like I'm chastising you, but
No.
you
No.
definitely corrected not just my thought but the language, that we
Right.
have to be careful that even in trying to explore ways to avoid quote unquote domestic violence, that we're not
Yeah.
victim shaming
Right.
and victim blaming, because if a person is abusive,
Hmm.
the reason why you receive it is not because you didn't avoid it. And I
Right.
wanted to say that to those who would watch, that it's not your guilt to carry, but
Right.
you have to put it somewhere. And let's talk
Right.
about the glory, because we put, thankfully, to the foot of the cross of Jesus. And
Right.
sometimes we're thieves and go grab it. And he's like, give it back to me. It's mine
Yeah.
now. Don't be, I would say a phrase like Indian giver, but that's totally politically correct. Don't
Right.
go rustling at night to pick up this thing that you dropped off to me.
Right.
But that is the blessing of the resurrection. So thank you also for your honesty, that the desire and the decision that you're going to live different was overnight, and you
Yeah.
were supernaturally blessed not to go through some of the worst of withdrawals, but
Right.
the immediacy of that decision also had to
Hmm.
work itself out, because now that he's born, you have decided not to decide to have a drug-filled pregnancy, but not have a drug-filled mothering life. And
Right.
people should hear that, because sometimes we jump to the glory and we don't
Hmm.
talk about the death and the betrayal. And if we
Right.
only talked about Jesus coming back or
Hmm.
Jesus coming out, and beating up the devil and taking the grave clothes off, then we will forget about the stripes and the pain and the shame and
Right.
being betrayed.
Right.
So I want to talk a
Absolutely.
little bit about your glory, and I know our time is almost up. But like I said, I do have the benefit of editing, but we're doing pretty good on time. Um,
Okay.
Now, as you shared with me, the the bulk of this happened almost 20 years ago, if not
Right.
more.
22 years ago.
Oh,
Yeah.
hallelujah. Hallelujah.
22 years. Yeah.
You have been living in a lot of glory. Could you share,
Absolutely.
however you want to describe your glory? Because understanding, everybody, glory is not perfection of
Right.
life, but what freedom in being reborn, even through becoming a mother and deciding you're that thing that you didn't think was cool, you wanted
Hmm.
that. You wanted that safety. You wanted that freedom back.
Right. Well, we did, me and Brandon's dad did get married. We weren't married long. So I was a single mother, it's, most of his life, actually. I did have a boyfriend, but as far as one, day to day, it was me and my mom and my son. So bless his heart, he was raised by two women, but he's real sensitive because of it. So that's a good thing. But, probably the freedom of it alone, not having to chase the drug, not having to find the money to do it, knowing that I was responsible for raising my son and financially responsible for, I mean, I was responsible for him. And I knew that I couldn't I couldn't do both. And so I had to make that decision, like, what is more important? Well, of course, like I say, I think from the day I could say baby, I wanted a house full of them. And so that was just so much more important to me, and I go back to exactly what I thought was the reason I did drugs, was to get away from my parents, right? Like, I thought they were too strict. They were pushing, they were pushing me to be this person. But that's so far from the truth. And so, but I reverted back to understanding that what they gave me was support and love and stability and morals and, just everything that good parents can give you. And I'll be honest with you, you put in the advertisement about what I do for a living, which is I'm a victim advocate for victims of sexual violence. And through this job, I have been able to learn so much about myself and learn where my blessings are. And the top of the list is the fact that I was raised by a God-fearing mother and father, that I have been prayed over my entire life, that I have aunts and uncles to this day that still live right next door to me, that if I needed anything, I have no doubt
Wow.
they would be there. Um, and I wanted that same security and stability for my son. And it was important enough to me to get that for him, to keep that in his life. He needed that. Um, and again, my job has taught me that, because I do see survivors with no support system and how difficult it is for them to get to the point of having self-confidence and happiness and security and safety in their lives, because they have to do it all. They didn't have mom and dad praying over them. They didn't have aunts and uncles that are there to help. And some of the survivors I've worked with have zero support, nobody to talk to. Um, and I've seen a few of them go from some really dark places to some really stable homes and stable lives for themselves, and I've seen them do it, and it is really highlighted in my life how blessed I have always been. A little bit spoiled, probably, um
Probably.
but I'm thankful for that. Where 22 years ago I was not. 22 years ago it felt like it was against me, not for me. And now I look back and I realize exactly what it was. It was the love and the security that my parents knew I needed.
And Brandi, if I could brag on you a little bit, before I brag on you a little bit, before we come to a close, Shandrika has been, I want you to hear her statement, how powerful
Okay.
it is that you wanted your child more than the drugs. And it's
Absolutely.
unfortunate that there are a number of people who can't say that. And,
Right.
and it's not a judgment against them. We want to see
No.
them free too. And that you have definitely, and I love it. I almost wonder if Shandrika also works with a number of, particularly women who've been in different circumstances, but you've gone from
Right.
victim to victor, victim
Yes.
to victor. And that's why we call so many people survivors. I think people should
Yeah.
start saying drug survivors or addiction survivors, or maybe, I don't
Right.
know, we need to sort of carry that along, because even though I think it's very smart to be mindful that it's just
Hmm.
the grace of God, it's not just because you just have this amazing willpower, for
Right.
people to still identify, well, addiction, it is in remission, or I forgot what the word is, but I've
Right.
been recovered. But it's like you're a survivor, that, and so that's why when I say you don't look like what you've been through, it's because God has done a work in you and it's been
Right.
completed. And that she also said, thank you for sharing your testimony. I'm
Thank you.
blessed by your
Thank you.
testimony, because whether it's addiction, and this is where I'm bragging, whether it's an addiction to things that could cause you to be in jail and hurt your,
Hmm.
or criminal, there's a
Hmm.
lot of addictions and habits that will cause us, ooh, don't call, maybe that's why I don't have a makeup, because I feel like crying, that can cause us to cut short what God
Hmm.
has for us, that we literally
Yeah.
could be walking dead and dying. um
Mhm.
Brandi has lost a tremendous amount of weight,
Yep.
and it didn't come off fast, and it didn't come off easy.
Yep.
And I now that I know that 20 something years ago, even though you weren't in some type of depressive state that started the drug
Right.
use, to just know that. And then I know also, like, life happens, that
Hmm.
like how strong not only is the power of resurrection in your life, but how you are continuing to improve and find ways to treat yourself better. Because
Yeah.
now Brandon's out the home. It's not all about being a good mom for him. You're being a
Right.
good friend to yourself. Do you mind
Yeah.
sharing with my audience how much weight you've lost? And
Not a bit.
even if you find yourself thinking differently now that you've also gone through that process or are going through it.
Absolutely. So I am up to, I've lost 3 more pounds, 139 pounds. I thought it was 150, but I've looked back and it was 139 pounds
We'll
that I've
take
lost.
152. I mean, because that's just a meal. That's
Yeah, that's
a
right.
couple
I've
meals.
lost 150. I have a long way to go. I probably have another 100 pounds to lose to be healthy, as healthy as I can be. But I will tell you this. When I was at my heaviest weight, I was always one that I've been big most of my life. And it never bothered me. I've never had self-esteem issues because of it. Like, I've always been a very confident person until I reached 486 pounds. That was the heaviest I had been. And when I was 486 pounds,
Whoa, whoa. It just hit me what you just said.
what?
486 pounds?
Yeah, 408. No, I'm sorry. 386 pounds.
Oh,
386, not
I
486.
was
I'm
just
sorry.
like, wait a minute. You held that
386.
well, because I went searching for pictures of that, and I
Right,
saw,
no, no.
whoa, she did
But
lose weight.
still, 386. I'm sorry. No, 386 pounds. I had issues. My son was in the band, and I wouldn't go up the steps at the stadium because I was afraid. I had an ankle problem that was always agitated because of my weight. I wouldn't even go up into the stands. I'd just sit on the bottom, and my family would all be up in the stands, and I was afraid to go up the steps.
Wow.
I was afraid coming down the steps would be a problem. Um, I had a really hard time moving and walking, and I would sleep a lot. I stress ate a lot. I worked a really stressful job at the time, like physically stressful. It was all over the place, and I constantly had food. Me and a former coworker were just talking. My whole cabinet on my desk was just full of food. Because I was always eating. If there was food on the counter, I was always putting it in my mouth. Um, what has changed is I am hyper now, and I drive my family crazy. Um, but I have more
Hyper on
energy.
life.
My sister's like, "Whoa, dude, slow down," but I'm busy, and it's like I just feel good again for the first time since high school, probably. As far as my weight goes, I feel lighter physically and mentally because I don't they're at the very end, like I say, when I was 386, let me get the number right. Sorry. When I was
No, I was
386
even more
pounds,
like, you were 486. I didn't see
no,
any
no, no.
pictures of that person. Okay.
Right, right. No, I'm sorry.
Not that
386.
386 is, I know, ain't nothing.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things that I just never thought I would ever be able to accomplish. I was diabetic. I am diabetic. I shouldn't say was. I'm diabetic. That's simply because of my weight issue. Um, because I just didn't treat myself well. And for 10 years, I was diagnosed diabetic and denied it completely. Um, and then one day I met Dr. Tarazi. I'll just call his name out. I loved him. He's not here anymore. He was in Tallahassee, but he's now back in New York City. And
New
Dr.
York
Tarazi,
City.
New York City, that's where he's from. So he went back to New York City, and I miss him like crazy. He told me, he said, "I'll go ahead and let you know if you do not do what I ask you to do, I will dismiss you. I will not waste your time or mine. I need for you to be serious about this or you're going to kill yourself."
He
He
was about to
really,
break up with you. He was going to break up with you as your
he,
doctor.
yep, Yep, he was going to let me go because he said he was not going to waste his time or mine if I was not serious about it. And on the way home that day, I said, I have to quit being in denial. I was in complete denial. And my sugar levels were about 386 at that point. My sugar was through the roof. And I was totally just normal. That was normal to me. But now that my sugar is low, I realize how abnormal I felt. Um, that was the turning point for me. That particular doctor telling me, you've got a choice you have to make. You have to go one way or another. And I chose to follow his instruction. And then just on a whim, I chose to go vegetarian or pescatarian because I do eat seafood. Um, and that's changed my life. I love it. I don't miss meat. I was having migraines once a month. I don't get migraines like that anymore. I get them occasionally, but not like I did.
You don't
Um,
miss chicken? Fried chicken? You don't miss fried chicken?
I don't. I don't. I just, bacon at first was hard. Bacon and sausage was probably my two hardest ones. Because my mom will still, like I said, I lived with my mom after my dad passed away. We moved in with her. She'll still eat meat. She'll still
Yeah.
cook chicken and bacon. And so at first it was like, oh, I want a piece of bacon. And I did eat a piece one day. I cheated with some bacon and ended up with a migraine. And I
What is it?
realized that pork was what was causing my migraines. I've cheated with chicken, pork, and beef. The only thing that didn't bother my system was beef. Chicken makes me very sick. Pork
That's
gives me a headache.
interesting because you also eat very clean. You have a bustling garden. So
I
I'm
do.
like, when was the last time you bought produce in a store? So I could imagine eating chicken, and most of our chicken now is definitely full with, a bunch of hormones that your
Hmm.
body reads it. But if you're eating clean beef that hasn't been processed, I could imagine
It's
that
better.
that
Yeah.
may be.
Yeah. I've always said, I was raised on a cattle farm, and my dad was, he was one of his hats was raising cows for beef, right? So he could feed the family. And so I was raised on steak like it was nothing. And roast beef and meatloaf and, just a lot of beef growing up. And maybe that's why my system doesn't react to it because it's used to it. But I said, if I ever eat meat again, it will be either wild game or homegrown meat because I, I really honestly, and this may be a little bit graphic, but I'm going to just be candid. um, I never had regular cycles my entire life until I quit eating meat. And now they've been a lot more regular. And I really say that has a lot to do with the hormones that they put in our chicken, especially our chicken. Um,
Lord,
I-
please do not call me to vegetarianism. But you may not know. Every time I talk to you about your veg, or you mention vegetarianism, or you don't eat meat,
mhm.
something pitter patter goes in my heart. Like, why don't you try it for a year, or why don't you just try it? Like, not
Try
that
it for
you'll
a week.
never.
Yeah,
Like, I mean, I've definitely done 40 days. I've done 6 months.
right.
Especially because when I was in college, or even the church I used to attend in the
Hmm.
early 90s, it would be nothing for there to be a consecration and we can't eat this and can't eat that.
Right,
I
right.
did recognize that you could be a vegetarian and still not healthy, as far as you can overeat peanut butter. I didn't know peanut butter can cause you to gain weight so much. I'm like, why am I not losing weight? All I'm doing is eating peanut butter. But
I could eat it right out of the jar. I love
and
it. But yeah, you're right.
I'm not a crazy meat person. I can go days
Right,
and not miss it. However, it's like the compliment,
right,
you take
right.
out meat, you're probably never going to eat a hamburger. So the fries and the bread
Right.
on the sandwich, and it's sort of like it's the gateway to the
Hmm.
other stuff,
Yeah.
And so, and then, because you do eat clean with fresh, you can call it organic, you know what you put on it. It
Right.
just makes me think like, I wonder if I ate like her,
Right.
what would my skin be good? Like right now, I'm like totally obsessed with the fact that I don't have on any makeup, and I have like, I don't know if this is I hope it's not a ringworm, but it's like a little rash right here. And so when I hear
Uh-huh.
people talk about vegetarianism and their skin clearing up and their bowels being beautiful
Right.
and they have so much energy, I'm just like, I wonder like if I did like a real heavy, uncooked, organic vegetable based diet, I should say, versus vegetarian, how
Right.
different would my overall life be?
Well, and I'll be honest with you, I don't eat a whole, and I'm gonna have to let you know my phone's just about to die. I didn't
No
realize that.
problem. That's
Um,
why I was
but,
bending down. Mine was
right.
dying. And
But I
we've
did,
gone past an hour. I feel like
yeah,
this is now turned into part two,
right.
health with Brandi. But I'm gonna let
Well,
you
I
say
did
this,
want to
and
let
then
you
we'll
know.
close up our time.
I do not eat as clean as what people think. I do eat a lot of vegetables, yes, and I've learned to adapt my diet around eating things a little different than what Southerners are used to eating, right? We're used to a lot of butter, a lot of mayonnaise, a lot of fat,
Mm.
and so I do, I mean, sometimes I eat like a toddler. I really like would rather just have a box of macaroni and cheese. And so I allow that myself that. I don't eat that every day. But I do eat junk. I mean, I promise you I do. But I also take a diabetic medication that acts as an appetite suppressant. And so I don't want to give people false hope that if you just quit eating meat, you're going to lose 139 pounds. That's not the case. My medication has helped me with that a lot.
You know,
Um,
because of that, I think I want to start going to your endocrinologist. So, like, I want some of that medication.
right, right. And so I don't want to give people false hope that, hey, just quit eating meat and you'll lose a lot of weight. That's not true. Um, it's what you eat, number one, and it's the medication that has curbed my appetite to the point, really, I'm over controlled at this point. So I'm not even eating enough calories to sustain myself at this point. And
And
I've
that's
started walking.
dangerous
Right, it is dangerous.
because
And so
it makes your
I'm
body,
having,
for those of you who don't know why, it makes your body basically go into like little programming of malnutrition, and it holds on to
mhm.
extra calories instead of letting you eliminate them because it doesn't know when you're going to feed it.
Yeah,
And you
exactly.
know,
Exactly. And it also, when your sugar is over controlled, it makes you go into like an anorexia state, and where you just, food is just not important. And so I'm over controlled
really,
a little bit. Yeah, so it's not healthy either way. So I don't want people to think that, oh gosh, she's done all this exercise. I just started walking about a month ago, month and a half ago, maybe, for the first time in years. And I'm proud of myself for it because I'm up to a little over 2 miles a day. I'm hoping to get to 3 miles a day by next week. I've got goals, I've got ideas, and so I'm finally at the point where even though I've been losing weight, I'm now fixing to take control of it myself as well. And so, like I said, I just don't want to give people false hope because I am on an appetite suppressant, which is actually a diabetic drug. It just acts as an appetite suppressant. So,
yeah, there's been a lot of because of course sugar and how sugar is distributed in our body does affect our like cravings. So that makes
right,
sense. And
it does.
anyone taking metformin knows for a while you could be like crapping out
Mhm.
2 pounds every three
Right,
months. But
right.
as we close, the reason why, besides just the fact that I'm proud of you, that I wanted to talk about that, and again, not just for you, and if I'm going to use your pain, I want to use your glory too,
Right,
is
right.
that I'm so proud of you and I'm inspired by you, not just
Oh,
to lose weight, but to take care of myself. In
yeah.
your story, it was the deal of taking care of your unborn child
Hmm.
or taking care of him now born needing a good role model. Well, he grown up wherever he is doing whatever he wants to.
Yeah.
And and you are similar to me, but your mom is really spunky and independent. You live
Yes.
with your mother, or she lives with you, however that
Hmm.
works, but
Hmm.
you're keeping an eye on her. She's getting to be a certain age. So it's
Yeah.
for you to say, I'm going to honor my body. I am worth it. It's not attached to whether or not someone needs my money, my booze for breastfeeding, me taking the
Right.
Boy Scout. And so secretly, I'm just like so in awe of you that to
Oh,
know that you have honored yourself. And the other day when we were talking and you had on that very nicely fitted outfit on, and you're like, I'm dispensing with more clothes that just don't fit me anymore. And you were talking about what your goals were and walking. I was just like, there she is. I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. Giving
Um,
yourself permission to applaud and love on yourself.
yeah.
And I think anyone who's ever dealt with any addiction or any secret shame, we have to understand that that is a provision of God. That's not pride, and it's
That's
not
right.
shallow, and it's
Right.
not vanity. He says we're wonderfully and fearfully made. And so that is just as much a part of your resurrection as anything else you've talked about today. Even the
Yeah.
sense, your sobriety is also
Hmm.
seeing yourself like God sees you. Like, this is what's
Yeah.
possible for you. This is not
Yeah.
about size or weight or clothes, but it's the idea of like you should be able to run up something you want to or
Yeah.
do whatever you want to and not hide. And there's so
Yeah.
much more we could talk about. And now that you're on this journey that I won't reveal now, I'm definitely going to be bringing you back because I want to see how that goes, because Brandi
Absolutely.
Turner is turning some things around. And if you enjoyed this and you're watching the watch party even now, thank you, Chandrika, for chiming in and letting our guests know how much we appreciate her sharing her story. I really feel, and even if your phone goes off, it's fine, Brandi, because she has other things to do. She sacrificed
Yeah.
to even make it here. I feel very compelled to pray or even ask you to
Please
pray, but I
do.
didn't want to put you on. Did you say YouTube?
Yeah. I said, please do.
Oh, I thought you said you too, because like,
No.
yeah, I was like, well, maybe Brandi will pray. I just wanted to close this time out in prayer, and also pray for you, because I know anytime you sort of tell a story publicly,
Hmm.
even though I believe you'll only get great feedback, I don't want 2 days from now or a week from now, you'd be like, what did I say? What did I do? And let me
No,
just
it's
say,
fine.
the enemy has no control. You are totally, it's something freeing about it. You ain't got nothing, you can't hold nothing over my head. I told you, you know?
That's right.
So,
That's right.
Father, in Jesus' name, I thank you so much for turning things around in Brandi's life, God. I thank you for her father's love. I thank you for your heavenly love towards her, her love for her son, and also her love for herself. I thank you, God, that this is a miracle. She says she had a miracle baby. She is a walking miracle. Thank you, God, that you did not allow the destruction in those 6 years to be devastation for the rest of her life, and that she uses what was her turning from sort of an ideal, quaint life to choosing a life of tragedy to then choose again a better life. That when she's talking to those who are hurt and broken, that they know that she's not coming from an Eiffel Tower, but she has experienced and maybe even done some of the same things in desperation. But God, I thank you for her. And I pray not only for her, but I pray for anyone listening that they may be right now a parent whose child is into drugs and they want to kick them out. And God, you're gracing them to consider another way. Maybe rehab, maybe staying uh, in the house, maybe staying with a relative. There's someone listening who feels like they're at the end of themselves and it's not even worth it. God, I pray that they would hear these words and this testimony of Brandi, and literally, like her last name, as a Turner, they can turn things around. There may be someone listening who's been doing very well for the most part in beating the habits that have held them bound, but they find themselves slipping. And they sometimes will think, well, I might as well just go all the way and forget it. Lord, let them be reminded that it is a process. It comes with a decision, but sobriety in all of its forms is a process, and it's day by day, moment by moment. And Lord, I thank you, God, that even those who may feel like this is the furthest from their reality, I thank you that we can translate it and understanding anything that we may secretly be dealing with, any double life, even if we feel like we're doing it for the good of family reputation or even our own sense of wellness. Lord, I thank you for that we don't have to be in denial about our health issues. We don't have to be in denial about our mental health or our relational issues or our financial issues, that we literally can take that burden and put it at the feet of the cross. And even though we may come back and steal it sometimes, that you are there and you want us to be free from it, just like you made us to be free in you and free from the fear of death, because if we believe in you, we will one day live again with you and even those saints who've gone on before. I thank you for this very special Hope More show that is helping me hope more. And thank you for blessing us with Brandi, and keep her safe in your arms in her travels. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Oh my God, thank you so much. If you can still stay on for a second, if your phone does cut off,
Okay.
let's just say bye to my beautiful Hope More family. Thank you guys for coming on, especially those who, seeing that the time was 5:30, still was like, what's going on? Let me get on. We will have a wonderful watch party, and I want to encourage you to please post and share. Try to wait till 5:30 so there's not as much confusion, and let
Right.
us know how you've been blessed by this particular show. Have a great Resurrection Saturday, and I'll see you guys tomorrow at 5:30, and I'll see you, Brandi, next week.
Absolutely. Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Have a good
I
one.
love
Bye
you
bye.
guys,
Happy
and I'm muting.
Easter.